Hello and welcome to this screencast on types and uses of feedback. Some of you may have looked at this at GCSE, others of you wouldn't have. However, there are more feedback types you need to know for A-level PE, so no one's at an advantage here. Okay, so if we look at what we've done so far, we've looked at classifications of skill, stages of learning, practice types and types of guidance. Our aim over this week is to concentrate on feedback, and we are going to be looking at the different types of feedback a coach may give to an individual to improve their performance. What we need to be looking at over this week is intrinsic feedback, extrinsic feedback, positive, negative, knowledge of performance, knowledge of results, and we're also going to be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of using each type of feedback. So remember, skill acquisition, we're all about being a coach and improving performance. Feedback is information provided back to the individual, to the athlete. Okay, so different types of feedback relate to different learners at what stage of learning they're at specifically. Now, if you think about being a cognitive learner or an autonomous learner, the feedback you receive from your coach is completely different. For a cognitive learner, your feedback might be quite positive. Okay, you might have some praise there. For an autonomous learner, yes, you might get praise, obviously, because it's important to have positive feedback. However, there may also be more negative feedback with an autonomous learner because they want to improve, they want to be the best, they want to kind of understand where they're going wrong. So this is something we're going to be going on to. What's really important is a specific piece of work we've already looked at when it comes to evaluating, and that is the stages of learning, as I've just come on to then. So we need to be able to link the stages of learning to the types of feedback. In green is what we're going to be doing in today's lesson, and then the other two we'll be looking at in next lesson. So it's really important, please listen to me on this. So when you do your Cornell notes, your questions have to be around the evaluation as well as the explanation, but not just the explanation of each one. I don't want questions just on explaining each one. I really need you to have questions interrogating the evaluation points, because that is what's really important. If we look at past paper questions, we've got 2 markers. Okay, so explain what is meant by the terms positive and negative feedback using sporting examples for each. State one advantage and one disadvantage of using negative feedback, and we've got a 10 marker here, so it can be a really important topic, this part. Okay, using practical examples, evaluate the different types of feedback that a coach or leader might use to help improve the performance of a sports performer. They're the types of questions we may have. Moving on, we'll look at positive feedback. So positive feedback is positive stimulus or praise following a successful outcome, e.g. praising a successful pass in football. Okay, now that example, we can be more specific, which I'm going to move on to in a minute. So if we're looking at positive feedback, it is that praise following a successful outcome. Well done for using the inside of your foot when passing that football. Okay, well done for that layup shot in basketball. Praising the individual is positive feedback, positive praise, positive praise. Now, if we go on to the advantages of positive feedback, as I've said, it's effective. So when is positive feedback effective? When is the information you are giving to the individual, the athlete, effective? First of all, it has to be specific to the part of the skill. You can't just say, well done for that pass in football, because like, well, which part are you well done in? Which part of the skill? The fact that I did a through ball, timed it successfully, used the inside of my foot to put backspin on it, and so on. So you have to be specific to the part of the skill. Well done for using the inside of your foot when passing the football. This is really important because it strengthens the SR bond, stimulus response bond, towards the desired response. Okay, so well done for getting your head over the ball when passing the ball. That getting your head over the ball strengthens the SR bond, okay, between, or to get the desired response that you want. Okay, so next time I do this, I'm going to have to get my head over the ball. Or, as I said before, with the inside of your foot, well done for passing the ball with the inside of your foot. So that strengthens the SR bond between using the inside of your foot to get the desired response. So you're going to do it again and again and again. What is this going to do? This is clearly going to increase confidence and motivation for a cognitive learner. Okay, so if you think about it, particularly for a cognitive stage learner, positive feedback is really good for that cognitive stage learner, that beginner. You're specific, so they understand what part of the skill was successful, which part of the skill was good. This strengthens the stimulus response bond to get that desired response continuously. This increases confidence and motivation for the cognitive stage learner. Of course, every stage learner wants positive feedback. However, it's specifically important for cognitive stage learners. Disadvantages, if we go and look at kind of like when is it not effective, it's not effective first of all when the praise is not specific. Okay, if it is not specific, then they don't know which part of the skill to improve on, therefore which part do you strengthen the SR bond between, so it has to be specific. If you're constantly praising someone, okay, and it is overused, this can definitely lead to being demotivated. Okay, so if it is overused and undeserved, mainly overused, this can decrease performance or motivation. Sorry, not performance, motivation, particularly for autonomous stage runs. If you're constantly being praised, it loses its impact, and this can severely decrease motivation, particularly for the autonomous stage learner. So that's positive feedback. If we now go on to negative feedback, they work in pairs: positive, negative, intrinsic, extrinsic, so on. So negative feedback, this is a negative stimulus or criticism following an unsuccessful outcome. Okay, now a really good word to use here is criticism, because when we think of criticism and we think of sport, specifically feedback, not just in sport, in anything, if you receive criticism, usually it can be seen as good if we use a different word with criticism, which we're going to come on to with the advantage of it. Okay, so an example of negative feedback, which would be a coach criticising a netball player for making a poor pass into the shooters or the attackers. Okay, so that is an example of negative feedbacks, having criticism. A coach criticising a netball player for making a poor pass. Okay, so what word comes along with criticism a lot to improve people? It is constructive. Okay, so if the feedback or criticism is constructive, so constructive criticism, or it's specific on how to improve. Okay, that shot didn't work out there because you didn't get your head over the ball, or you did not use the inside of your foot, therefore that is why that happened. That is going to be an advantage to negative feedback. It has to be constructive and it has to be specific. We hear this term constructive criticism all the time. If criticism is not constructive, it is not useful. It must be constructive criticism. This, when you tell someone or show someone how you're going to improve, this is going to increase performance. Okay, so you are going to, from this, increase motivation, not performance. You're going to increase motivation by doing this, and from this, you've got to think this is good for autonomous performance. As I've said earlier, this allows them to perfect the performance, because autonomous learners are perfectionists and they see failure as a stepping stone to success. Okay, so autonomous performers, kind of, is a negative feedback is effective for them, okay, because they need to know what they've done wrong so they can improve it, and this increases their motivation, but it has to be constructive. So disadvantages, if we look at disadvantages, it's not effective. So negative feedback is not effective if it is not specific or not constructive. Okay, if it doesn't tell you how to improve, then how on earth is that an advantage to anybody? If you get criticism but not being told how to improve, how to better yourself, this is not good. Okay, can be overused by certain people, and if it's overused with cognitive performers, this can severely decrease motivation. So if negative feedback is constantly used and there's no positive feedback used for a cognitive performer, this is really going to decrease motivation. Moving on to intrinsic feedback. So intrinsic, hopefully you've come across this term before. We've learned about it with regards to the autonomous learner, or the state when we talked about stages of learning. Intrinsic feedback comes from within the performer internally. Okay, so intrinsic is internally. Intrinsic feedback would be a performer physically feeling that they've hit the sweet spot for a squash racket, or kicking a football, or shooting in netball. Okay, you know personally within, you can feel that you've got that kinesthetic feeling of the outcome of the result. So intrinsic feedback comes from within, it doesn't come from praise or like positive feedback or negative feedback, criticism. It comes from within you personally. This is really good or effective as it is instant. Okay, movements can be corrected immediately. Sometimes you know a shot is going to be poor before you've even kicked the ball. Autonomous learners, really good, successful sports people, can actually immediately change or correct that so that the outcome isn't as bad. So intrinsic feedback is instant, which is really important. It's immediate. You do not have to rely on others to give you feedback. It is purely from within, and this is really good for an autonomous stage of learner who knows what the skill feels like. If you think about it, an autonomous stage learner is fluent and they rely on intrinsic feedback, so they know how a skill feels. Therefore, the feedback they get intrinsically from within is really good as it is instant, and they understand how the skill feels. Disadvantages for intrinsic feedback: it is not effective for cognitive stage learners, as they do not know the true kinesthetic feeling of the skill. Okay, so intrinsic, they don't know what it feels like, so they don't really know what that sweet spot feels like at the beginning of their learning. Your feedback intrinsically might not be accurate, which will lead to errors in performance. So especially for the cognitive stage learner, imagine if a cognitive stage learner does a shot that's terrible, the coach gives them positive feedback, which strengthens the SR bond between that terrible decision. They have been given incorrect and inaccurate information, which may lead to errors in performance in the future. Okay, so that's where it kind of marries up together. Intrinsic feedback can take a long time to develop, okay, because it is important that, or it's important you understand that becoming an autonomous learner takes time. Therefore, intrinsic feedback, which is really good for the autonomous learner, takes a really long time to develop. Okay, extrinsic feedback. This comes from an external source to the performer, e.g. from a coach telling the performer they hit the ball correctly, or actually from actually seeing something happen. So seeing a goal being scored could potentially be good for extrinsic feedback. So a positive for this is it's effective for cognitive stage learners. Okay, so especially a coach telling them that they've performed something successfully, because a cognitive stage learner doesn't have that intrinsic feel yet. They do not understand what the skill kinesthetically feels like. Therefore, it's really important they get feedback from a coach telling them externally that they've done something successful. There you go. Coach can provide accurate feedback, which leads to improved performance. And this will help the performer to develop intrinsic feedback. If you do something successfully and you're not sure what it looks like, but the coach tells you that it was successful, then that is going to help develop that intrinsic feedback. So the negatives, or where it's a disadvantage, which you might get from the advantages, are, first of all, if feedback is inaccurate, this can decrease the quality of performance, especially for a cognitive stage learner. If a coach gives a cognitive stage learner incorrect feedback or inaccurate feedback, then it's going to affect their performance overall, which can lead to decreased motivation. If you're getting extrinsic feedback that's incorrect and you continue to produce the same skill but not getting better, this is going to decrease your motivation. And then also, this does not develop as much kinesthetic awareness within the individual. Okay, so obviously kinesthetic awareness is all about that intrinsic feedback. So there are the 4 types of feedback we're going to be looking at today. Please ensure that your corner notes are interrogating the evaluation points, please. That's really important. But we also need to know how to explain each type of feedback. So we've got positive, negative, intrinsic and extrinsic that we're going to be looking at. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'll see you later. Bye.